Honored to be joined by Basketball Hall of Famer, the NBA's all-time leading scorer, writer, and political activist, and a voice that we need to hear in these times, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem, we would love to be talking to you about the return of the NBA, which is as close to happening as it's been in nearly 3 months since the COVID-19 pandemic. But there's so much else going on across the nation. Peaceful protests and demonstrations in reaction to the killing of George Floyd. We've seen police and crowds have violent encounters, looting, arrests. Kareem, what is happening in this country right now?
Well, I think the murder of Mr. Floyd really pulled the scab off of a very ongoing wound in our country, and that's the unequal treatment of certain Americans by the police, by certain members of the police. So let me make that clear. The majority of the men and women on our police forces are incredibly not recognized as heroes. But some of them have racist tendencies, and unfortunately, that ends up with a lot of people being hurt, and we have to do something about that.
Kareem, you wrote a powerful op-ed in the LA Times over the weekend, and I encourage everyone to read it if you have not, and then read it again. One part that I would like to read here, and I quote, "I don't want to see stores looted or even buildings burn. But African Americans have been living in a burning building for many years, choking on the smoke as the flames burn closer and closer. Racism in America is like dust in the air. It seems invisible, even if you're choking on it, until you let the sun in. Then you see it's everywhere. As long as we keep shining that light, we have a chance of cleaning it wherever it lands. But we have to stay vigilant, because it's always still in the air." Kareem, such a powerful metaphor that I have never heard before. What has been your reaction? What reaction have you received from people who have read this?
Well, I think we're dealing now with a moment of clarity. Just the fact that video went viral of Mr. Floyd's murder. People now can see what it's like to be a Black American. It was a very horrible crystallization of our experience, but there it is. And that, I think, is enabling us to think about doing something to remedy that. And that's what I'm hoping happens, because the dust that I talk about in the air, it accumulates around the lives of Black Americans, and it stifles the democracy that we're supposed to live in. The democracy doesn't affect us. We are at the bottom of the heap, so to speak. Those dust motes really choke our lives, not the people at the top. So I think that once we clear that dust out of the air, we'll be making our democracy work for everybody, and that's a very valid goal.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to read that, as I mentioned before. How old were you, Kareem, when you first experienced racial injustice?
Well, the thing that underlined it to me was when I was 17 years old. It's a very long time ago. In 1964, a young man was shot and killed by a New York City police officer named Thomas Gilligan. James Powell was his name. And there was no real explanation of how James died. All we had was the police officer's word for it, and there were people who doubted it. We never got to the bottom of it, but since that time, I've just noticed every so often there's an extreme case. I think the case that should resonate the most with Laker fans is, and give us something to think about. It's been almost 30 years since Rodney King incident, and nothing has changed. Incidents like that continue to happen across our country. So something has to be done about it.
What message do you have for younger generations that weren't alive or in LA during the Watts riots, or as you mentioned, Rodney King beating in '92?
I would just say to all of them, make a friend out of someone who doesn't look like you, and get to understand their humanity. It will make it a lot easier for you to understand what happens to people. That it's as simple as that, and you'll get a better understanding of who your fellow citizens are. That's really important. All of us need to be protected by the laws that are enacted for all American citizens. We should all be protected by that. Unfortunately, those laws have only protected certain segments of our society. Let's change that.
I agree, Kareem. And you were a teenager when you met Martin Luther King Jr. You were part of the civil rights movement over 55 years ago. How far have we advanced in this regard, if at all, as a nation?
We've made a lot of progress, no question, but there's also some backsliding. We have both things happening. There's great things in terms of progress. Black Americans and other Americans of color have made great strides since the civil rights movement. But there are areas that are really, there's been no progress. So, we've got to fix it. We've got to make it work for everyone.
How much more still needs to be done for all men and women to be created and treated equally? And where do we start collectively?
We start with a conversation. I think our political leaders have to figure out a way to legally make it structurally important that we are able to hold bad cops accountable. That would go a long way to dealing with the immediate problem. And I think that goal is attainable now that we are talking to each other.
Kareem, I heard you say that the first protest you took part in was at UCLA, and it was after Dr. King was assassinated. What do you remember about that day?
Well, it was a tough day. Dr. King was really someone that I just learned to appreciate when he was assassinated. And, we had a line of protesters on Bruin Walk just standing silently. And a number of people came up to me and said, hey, you're going to be drafted into the NBA. Why are you protesting? And it seemed to be the same mentality as the woman that confronted LeBron about shut up and dribble. LeBron was talking about a young boy that had been killed by a police officer in Cleveland. And Laura Ingraham said, we don't care about your opinion on this issue. Shut up and dribble. Well, that's not what it's about. The fact that I have the opportunity to play professional basketball did not mean that I couldn't be offended and outraged by Dr. King's assassination. And it's that type of mentality that we have to overcome.
Kareem, I heard you say, I feel like I'm caught between hope and history. Are you hopeful that more progress will be made in your lifetime?
Oh, absolutely. And, a lot of my hopes have been realized in some of the progressive things that have happened in our country since the civil rights movement. But history also is a factor, and the racism that has been part and parcel of our history also rears its head. So, we have to deal with that.
If these issues that plague us are systematic, how can we take positive steps toward equality?
Well, we just have to systematically go after them. We have to be as persistent as those problems are. We have to be just as persistent in trying to remedy them. It takes vigilance. I think that's what Thomas Jefferson said. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. We have to be vigilant about this stuff.
Kareem, athletes today, in part because of social media, have a voice and platforms that your generation did not have. You had mentioned LeBron James earlier. What do you think of those players like LeBron and others who have regularly commented on the social injustice that they see in the world?
I'm really proud of them. They stand in a long line. I guess we start with Jackie Robinson breaking the color line in 1947. And we all stand in a line, and I'm happy to stand with them. This is a righteous cause, and hopefully people will recognize that.
What role do you see for sports in the NBA when it returns to play in helping heal this nation?
I think sports can do a great service to this country by recognizing what the issues are. I think the NFL could deal with a really bad history that is very visible now. You, just like everyone else, could probably remember that Colin Kaepernick was making demonstrations by taking a knee before NFL games about this very issue. Black people getting killed by white cops for no good reason. And he made a peaceful demonstration before NFL games. And what happened to him? He was ostracized. He lost his job. He was blackballed. That was a peaceful demonstration about a real issue. Okay, so the NFL can do some righteous payback by straightening out that situation and just dealing with it straight up. And because they were mistaken. Colin Kaepernick was not disrespecting the flag. He was calling attention to a very real problem that affects Black Americans.
Kareem, you do, and you always will continue to try to make this world a better place. You partnered with UCLA Health and donated hundreds of safety goggles to healthcare workers and people on the front lines during this COVID-19 pandemic. Why was that so important to you?
Well, it's important that we give back. You know, I've had a wonderful stay here in Southern California. It's my home, and when there's trouble on the horizon, you know, I feel an obligation to give back to the wonderful people who have given so much to me.
Kareem, I'm 48 years old. I grew up in LA, but I don't know these experiences firsthand like you and so many others face on a daily basis. What can someone like me do to help bring the change we need?
Just encourage people to talk, and you know, you can support different efforts to do something about the problem. When political discussions come up about how do we have a better informed police commission, you can raise your voice. That's a very simple thing for people to do. And when the people at the top hear about the concerns of the people that they serve, they usually respond. So let's keep the conversation going. That's the best thing. I have a foundation that I'm involved in, the Skyhook Foundation, and we send kids to camp so that they can have STEM experiences.
Yeah, we've actually done a feature on that on Spectrum Sportsnet, and it definitely is a great foundation. Listen, Kareem, you're always writing, it seems, these days. Do you have any other recent initiatives that you'd like to tell Laker Nation about before you go?
Well, let me see. I'm doing messages for people. They can go to iconogram.com, and if they want me to help them celebrate a wedding, a birthday, a graduation, Father's Day, Mother's Day, you name it, I'll do a message for them. It's pretty simple. Iconogram.com.
That is awesome. Kareem, it's been an honor once again to speak to you. Thank you for your leadership and your voice. We appreciate you very much, my friend, and thank you for taking this time with me.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for your interest.
All right, thanks, Captain.
Go Lakers.
Go Lakers.